When the roll is called up yonder, I won't be there. It was Sunday morning, and I'd been missing from the orphanage for almost 3 days. I had run away with 2 of the other boys, but we separated when the police chased us through 5 Points area of Jacksonville, Florida. By the time darkness fell, it became almost impossible for me to find the other 2 boys. I climbed into the thick bushes of the park, and I tried to stay as warm as I could. The temperature was in the high 40s, but still I shivered all night. I was so thankful when the morning sun shone on my face. As I had not eaten for 2 days, I began to travel up and down the alleyways of Jacksonville, Florida, in search of food. Trying to find scraps in the restaurant garbage cans while trying to avoid the police was a very hard feat for a 7-year-old to accomplish. At last, I found a garbage can that had several heads of lettuce and a head of cabbage. I peeled off the slimy outer layer of the cabbage and began to eat the crunchy core. When the roll is called up yonder, when the roll is called up yonder, went the singing from the large red brick church over on Park Street. I like that. That's a pretty song, I said to myself. I broke the cabbage into small leafy pieces and stuffed as much as I could into my 2 front pockets. Then I headed across the street to the church. I stood out front listening to the song being sung. Even though it was somewhat muffled, slowly and very carefully, I walked up to the large wooden door and I cracked it open. When the roll is called up yonder, when the roll is called up yonder, when the roll is called up yonder, sang the beautiful voices. I placed my ear against the crack and I listened. I had never heard that song before, but I sure liked it. Though I didn't know the song, I knew they were singing about heaven and that there would be a roll call in heaven one day. I placed my eye to the crack and peeked inside. I looked at all the people all dressed in their fancy clothes. All the men were wearing dark suits, the women were in pretty long dresses, and some had great big hats with lots of decorations on them. I wonder if I'll be on the roll call, I thought to myself. I looked down to see the tears in my pants. My legs were scarred from running through the bushes, and my ankles were dirty and bleeding. I looked behind myself and saw all the fancy new cars belonging to the church members. I ain't never gonna be on the roll call, I thought. I ain't good enough to be on the roll call. Just at that moment, the large wooden door opened, hitting me in the head and knocking me backwards onto the concrete steps. "What are you doing here, boy?" yelled a large man dressed all in black. I was just listening to the roll call song, sir." "You had best leave before I call the police," said the man as he slammed the door closed. I got up on my hands and knees and I began to pick up the pieces of cabbage which had fallen when knocked backwards. Before I could retrieve all the pieces, the door opened once again. "Didn't I tell you to get out of here?" said the large man. "I was just getting my food stuff and I'll go real fast. Really, I will," I responded. The next thing I knew, the man reached out, grabbed me by the neck, and squeezed as hard as he could. I tried to pull away, but I couldn't break his grip. "You dirty little tramp," he said as he threw me to the concrete. I ran across the 15-foot sidewalk and stopped in the street. I turned around and watched as hundreds upon hundreds of people began filing out of the church. I watched the man's face as he smiled at each and every person and shook everyone's hand. Occasionally he'd look over at me and he'd give me a real dirty look. How can he be so good to them and so mean to me? I thought to myself. I stood there until every person had walked out of the church. The man looked at me and he locked one of the doors. I stood there watching him as he began to sing, when the roll is called up yonder." All at once the door shut and I could no longer hear the man singing. I pulled a large piece of cabbage out of my pocket and began to eat it. As I walked down Park Street, I sang, when the roll is called up yonder, when the roll is called up yonder, I won't be there.